The sun was blazing over the small town of Red Creek, a lonely place where dust danced in the air and the wind carried secrets no one dared to speak. Among the few faces wandering the wooden sidewalks was a thin little girl named Lydia Mae Carter. Her arm hung stiff and weak in a dirty sling made of torn cloth. The people who saw her looked away, pretending not to notice. Lydia was only 12 years old, but her eyes had seen more pain than most grown folks ever would. Her father, Ezekiel Carter, had once been a strong man, a ranch worker who could tame a wild horse and laugh loud enough to fill a barn. But after her mother passed away from fever, something inside him turned dark. He began spending his nights at the saloon, trading what little money they had for drinks and card games. When he lost, which was most nights, his anger found only one place to land: on his daughter. That morning, Lydia had tried to hide from him behind the chicken coop. She didn't make it far before he found her. His voice was slurred and his face red with drink. "You think you can run from me, girl? Get out there and make yourself useful. We need money, and you'll get it one way or another." When she didn't move fast enough, he pushed her so hard she fell on her arm. The pain was sharp and something cracked. She cried out, but he only pointed toward town. "Go on. Don't come home empty-handed." So Lydia did as she was told. With tears drying on her cheeks, she walked the long dirt road barefoot, her arm aching with every step. She carried a small tin cup she'd found behind the saloon weeks ago. By the time she reached the town, her throat was dry, and the sun felt like it was burning straight through her skin. She stood near the edge of the Silver Spur Saloon, the busiest place in Red Creek. Rough cowboys, miners and travelers came and went, kicking up dust as they laughed and shouted. Lydia kept her head down, whispering, "Please, sir." "Spare a coin?" Most passed her by. Some dropped a few cents, others didn't even glance her way. Hours passed. Her legs grew weak and her vision started to blur. Just as she was about to faint, a shadow fell over her, tall and still. "Easy there, miss," a calm voice said. She blinked up to see a man standing beside a chestnut horse. His hat shaded his face, but his eyes were kind, the kind that noticed things others didn't. His name was Cole Maddox, a cowboy passing through Red Creek after months riding the border trails. He knelt beside her. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she whispered, trying to hide her arm. But Cole could see the swelling, the bruising, and the fear behind her words. He lifted the tin cup, then looked back at her. "Who did this to you, little one?" She shook her head. "Please don't tell. He'll find me if I talk." Cole didn't push further. Instead, he picked her up gently, careful not to touch her broken arm. "We'll get that looked at." He took her to Doc Weller, the town's only doctor, an older man who'd seen more broken bones than he could count. When he unwrapped the sling, he frowned. "This arm's been broken for days. She's lucky it hasn't gone worse." Cole stayed quiet, watching Lydia bite her lip through the pain. When the doctor finished setting the bone, she fell asleep from exhaustion. "How much do I owe you, Doc?" Cole asked. Weller wiped his hands on a cloth. $5. Cole reached into his vest and handed over nearly every coin he had. "Make sure she's got food, too." When Lydia woke up that evening, she was lying on a clean cot with a blanket over her shoulders. She looked around confused until she saw the cowboy sitting in the chair beside her, his hat resting on his knee. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. He smiled a little. "Because someone should have a long time ago." Tears welled up in her eyes. "He'll come for me, my pa." "He always does." Cole leaned forward, his voice calm but steady. "Then he'll have to get through me first." For the first time in a long while, Lydia felt safe. She didn't know who this man was or why he cared, but his presence made her believe the world might still have a bit of kindness left. By morning, word had already spread through Red Creek. Folks in town whispered at the general store and around the saloon. "That Maddox fella took in Ezekiel's girl," someone said. "Crazy thing to do. That man's trouble." But Cole didn't care what people thought. He bought Lydia a small bowl of soup and a loaf of bread, making sure she ate. He spoke little about himself, but the stories others told painted him as a drifter, a man who'd once fought in the border wars and carried both scars and honor from them. That afternoon, Lydia sat on the porch outside the doctor's office, watching the horses trot by. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe without fear. The sun was warm on her face and the wind smelled like fresh hay. But peace never lasted long in Red Creek. By sunset, Ezekiel Carter stormed into town. his boots thudding heavy against the wooden walk. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt half-buttoned, and his voice carried down the street. "Where's my girl?" he shouted, slamming his fist on the saloon's doorframe. "Someone's been meddling in my business." People turned away, pretending to be busy. No one wanted to be involved. The bartender shrugged. "Heard she's with the doc, maybe. Some cowboy brought her in." Ezekiel's face twisted with anger. "A cowboy, huh?" He spat on the ground. "No good drifters think they can take what's mine." By the time night fell, Lydia and Cole were sitting quietly inside the doctor's house. She was telling him about her mother, how she used to sing at night when storms rolled over the plains. Cole listened without interrupting, his gaze steady and gentle. Suddenly, the door banged open. Ezekiel stood there, his shadow filling the room. "You," he barked, pointing at Cole. "You think you can steal my daughter?" Lydia froze. "Pa, please," but Cole rose slowly, calm as ever. "She's not a thing to be owned, Ezekiel. She's a child." Ezekiel's hand twitched near his belt, but he didn't draw. The silence stretched. Outside, the wind howled through the street. Cole didn't raise his voice, but every word carried strength. "You hurt her once, and I'll make sure you never do again. Walk away." For a moment, Ezekiel's jaw clenched. He looked at his daughter, her bandaged arm, her frightened face, and something in his eyes flickered. He muttered something under his breath, turned, and stumbled back into the night. Lydia began to cry quietly, but Cole placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he said softly. "He won't touch you again." She looked up at him with trembling lips. "You mean that?" He nodded. "I give my word." Outside, the town of Red Creek slept uneasily, but inside that small doctor's house, a little girl finally rested without fear for the first time in years. And somewhere deep down, the cowboy who had long ridden alone began to feel something he hadn't felt in a long while. Purpose. The next morning in Red Creek was calm, but it was the kind of calm that hides a storm underneath. Lydia woke early, the first rays of light shining through the curtains. Her arm still hurt, but it was wrapped tight and clean. She looked around the small doctor's room and saw Cole sitting by the window, polishing his old revolver. He noticed her watching. "You sleep any?" "A little," she said softly. "Did he come back?" Cole shook his head. "Not last night. But men like him don't give up easy." Lydia lowered her eyes. "He used to be different. When Ma was alive, he'd bring me wildflowers from the field. But after she died, everything turned bad." Cole listened quietly. He didn't say much, but his silence was kind. The kind that lets a person speak without fear. After a while, he stood and said, "You're safe for now, Lydia. I've got to talk to the sheriff. We'll make sure your pa don't bother you again." Lydia nodded, though her eyes still held worry. When Cole stepped outside, the town was just waking up. The blacksmith's hammer rang from across the street and the smell of biscuits came from the diner. But when he reached the sheriff's office, he found Sheriff Dobbins sitting at his desk, half asleep with his boots on the table. Cole tipped his hat. "Morning, Sheriff. We've got a problem." Dobbins squinted one eye open. "If it's about Ezekiel Carter's girl, I already heard. Best you stay out of that man's business, Maddox. He's mean when he's riled up." Cole crossed his arms. "She's a child. You gonna let him beat her half to death and call it family business?" The sheriff sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Look, I don't like it either, but law says it's hard to interfere between kin unless someone files a charge. You want to write one?" Cole stared at him. "She can't even write her name yet, Sheriff. But I'll file it myself if I have to." Dobbins leaned back, uneasy. "You sure you want to cross him? He's been drinking mean lately. Last man who talked back to him lost half his teeth." Cole's jaw tightened. "Then he'll learn what happens when a man picks on someone smaller than him." He turned and walked out, leaving the sheriff speechless. By noon, Ezekiel was back in town. His shirt was torn and his face was hard as stone. The moment he stepped onto Main Street, people moved aside. Everyone knew there was trouble coming. Lydia saw him first from the doctor's window. Her heart sank. "He's here," she whispered. Doc Weller looked out too. "You stay inside, girl. Don't you move." But Lydia was shaking. "He'll hurt Mr. Cole." Outside, Ezekiel's boots stomped up the steps of the porch. Cole was waiting for him, calm but steady. "You again?" Ezekiel growled. "You think you can keep my daughter from me?" "She's my blood." Cole's voice stayed even. "Blood don't give you the right to hurt her." Ezekiel's hand went to his belt, resting on his pistol. You're asking for trouble, cowboy. Cole didn't flinch. Maybe I am, but it won't be her who pays for it this time. The wind picked up, swirling dust between them. A small crowd began to gather. Townsfolk who'd watched Lydia suffer for months but had never dared to act. Let the girl go, Cole said quietly. You've done enough harm. Ezekiel's face twisted with rage. You think you're some kind of hero? You don't know a thing about me. Cole's eyes were cold but sad. I know enough. I've seen men like you before. Men who lost everything good and blamed the world instead of themselves. That was the spark. Ezekiel drew his gun fast but sloppy. Cole's reflex was faster. With one swift move, he aimed low and fired. The sound cracked through the air, echoing down the street. Ezekiel's gun spun from his hand and clattered to the ground. He staggered back, shocked more than hurt, staring at the smoking revolver in Cole's steady grip. The crowd gasped. No one had ever stood up to Ezekiel before. Cole holstered his weapon slowly. You're done, Ezekiel. Go home, or better yet, let the sheriff take you somewhere you can't hurt anyone. The sheriff finally appeared, panting from his run down the street. He looked from Cole to Ezekiel and back again. Guess it's time I do my job, he muttered. Ezekiel dropped to his knees, his anger finally breaking into something else. Shame. She's all I had, he mumbled. And I ruined it. Cole didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The sheriff led the broken man away in cuffs, and the crowd slowly scattered, whispering about what they'd just seen. Lydia stepped outside, her eyes wide. She looked at Cole, unsure if she should run to him or keep her distance. He smiled gently. It's over now. She started to cry, covering her face with her good hand. Cole knelt beside her. Hey now, none of that. You're safe, Lydia May. I didn't think anyone would ever stop him, she sobbed. He nodded. Sometimes all it takes is one person saying enough. Over the next few weeks, Red Creek began to change. People who once looked away started nodding kindly when Lydia passed. The storekeeper's wife offered her a small job sweeping the floors and counting coins behind the counter. It wasn't much, but to Lydia, it was the start of a new life. Cole stayed around a while longer, helping the blacksmith mend fences and fixing the doctor's wagon wheel. Every day, Lydia brought him water or lunch and followed him around, asking questions about horses, trails, and the stars. He answered them all with patience. One evening, as the sun sank low and the sky burned orange, Lydia handed him a small folded note. Her handwriting was uneven, but the words were clear. You didn't just fight my father. You fought for me. Cole read it slowly, his eyes softening. He looked down at her and said quietly, You're stronger than you think, Lydia. Don't ever forget that. She smiled shyly. Will you stay in Red Creek? He shook his head. There's a ranch out west that needs hands. I've been drifting too long. Time I earn my keep again. Her smile faded. Will you ever come back? He placed his hat on her head playfully. Maybe. But if I don't, you'll still see me every sunset. That's where cowboys live when they ride away. She laughed through tears, holding the hat tightly. The next morning, Cole packed his saddle and tied his bedroll behind him. The townsfolk gathered to see him off. Doc Weller clapped his shoulder. You did good, Maddox. Town needed someone with a backbone. Cole smiled faintly. Just did what was right. Lydia ran up as he mounted his horse. Thank you, Mr. Cole, she said, breathless. For everything, he tipped his hat. You keep your head high, little lady. And remember, you're never alone. You've got this whole town now. As he rode off toward the horizon, the wind lifted the brim of his hat, and Lydia waved until he disappeared in the golden light. She stood there a long time, the sound of his horse fading into the open plains. Life in Red Creek slowly returned to its rhythm. Lydia's arm healed, leaving only a faint scar, a reminder not of pain but of survival. Every evening she sat on the porch watching the sun dip low behind the hills, thinking of the cowboy who had fought for her when no one else would. And though he was gone, his promise stayed with her, that courage doesn't come from strength or anger, but from kindness and doing what's right. In the heart of the Wild West, where life was hard and mercy was rare, one man's quiet bravery changed a little girl's world forever. And in every sunset that painted the sky golden red, Lydia swore she could still see the shadow of a cowboy riding toward tomorrow, free, fearless, and forever remembered.